Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual but Not Religious Show. I'm your host, George. Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual but Not Religious Show. I'm your host, George Lewis. We've got a fantastic guest tonight. We're going to have a good time. We're going to talk about some really interesting stuff, things that I'm sure that you're going to be interested in. Frank Huguenard. Frank's a filmmaker, has actually done 2 films and has a 3rd one in process, actually raising the funds for the 3rd one at this point. My guest, I got a super guest next week. My guest next week is Michael Murdad. Michael did actually a couple of books. This one is on healing the heart and soul, and this one is an introduction to Tantra and sacred sexuality. So I think I think we'll have a really good talk with Michael next week. We had him scheduled a month ago or something, Tom, and just it couldn't come together on technical reasons for his part. So we're glad to have Michael on this coming week. I want to talk to you a bit before we get started about the Spiritual Broadcasting Network and about the Spiritual but Not Religious Show. You know, the people are really leaving the churches in droves. There's just a big exodus from churches for a lot of reasons, but I think the big reason is not finding the experience of a higher power and the idea of having to have an intermediary in order to get that experience with a higher power. Today, the government census tells us that 20%, that's a huge number, 20% of the U.S. population claim to be spiritual but not religious. The thing about being spiritual but not religious is that we're a really diverse lot. I mean, there's every kind of belief system you can think about in our group. Because we don't really go to church, most of us, some do, some don't, but most of us don't go to church. We haven't got a real community, and because of that, we have no place for our voices to be heard. And so the Spiritual Broadcasting Network is providing a space so at least some of our voices can get out there. Now, the Spiritual but Not Religious Show, you know, I'm quite convinced that there is a transformation in process, really kind of a spiritual revolution, if you will. You know, the world has been dominated by the dark side. The predominant factor, overriding factor, has been the dark side, and you can see it plainly with greed and pride and envy and war and all the stuff that's going on there. While the light side has kind of taken the back seat. And I believe we're coming to this place where we'll have a tipping point, and we'll move from the dark side being the overriding factor to the light side being the overriding factor. I don't think that that's necessarily going to happen in an instant. I think it will probably occur much like what happened back in the Dark Ages when it went into the Renaissance. You know, there was no place in time in that space when there was that transformation that you could point to and say, you know, at this day and this year, at this time of the day, everything changed. That's not what happened. It was kind of a gradual change. Probably the people who experienced it didn't even know the change was occurring. But as you look back in history, you can see it. And I want to do my part in participating in bringing that change about. And so that's the reason for that change. I got the show's producer, Tom Johnson. He also does the technical parts. He handles the engineering during the show time. Tom does a fantastic job for us. Thanks, Tom, for the job you do.
My pleasure.
We got Mr. Frank Huguenard on the phone.
We do.
Hey, Frank.
Hi, George. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Doing great. Things are actually working here pretty good. You look pretty good on the phone. Looks like we got some pretty good video. I've been looking forward to talking to you. I spent the day with you. Of course, you didn't know that. Watching your films and like doing a little bit of research on who I was going to be talking to tonight. You're a really interesting guy, Frank. We have many parallels. Not that I'm trying to catch your coattails as far as being interesting, but we as far as what we believe and how we pursued that.
Hmm.
You've done actually 2 films to this point. Beyond Me was your first one, and Beyond Belief.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I had initially, a few years ago, I started a book that I entitled Beyond Me, and I finished the manuscript about 18 months ago, and I never got it published or took it to an editor or anything like that. And about a year ago, on a whim, I decided I would just take the manuscript and make a documentary out of it. So without any training or experience or help or money, I went off and became a documentary filmmaker.
I think you made a wise move not going for the publishing of the book. Just about everybody writes a book these days with all the self-publishing capabilities. It's really a tough job, and video's taken over in film, and so I think you're in the right area. You're probably having a better time doing that too, aren't you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's really incredible what a single person is capable of doing, given what technology has evolved to in this day and age.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I made that film in 8 weeks' time. It was, with HD video cameras. I just got a new camera, and it's the size of my fist. It's got 64 gigabytes of flash memory on it. So this camera that's the size of my fist can take 6 hours of HD video. I mean, it's just mind blowing.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. I'm in the middle of doing a documentary myself. One of the things that I think was a leg up for you with your documentary is you already had the script written because you had the book. So that was a big. How long did it take you to write the book?
Well, I worked on and off on it for about 18 months or 2
Right.
years. And that one, I actually thought I was finished with the documentary in 3 weeks.
Right.
I mean, once I set my mind, okay, I'm going to do this. I put it together. Then we had a few focus groups, and I got a lot of feedback. And actually, people kept telling me, "Hey, Frank, you need to be in the film yourself." I was like, "No, I don't want to do that. I'm no good." And blah blah blah. The name of the film is Beyond Me. It's not supposed to be about me.
And being in the film is Beyond Me, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But once I saw the very first clip that you see in Beyond Me, where I'm in sort of with all the ferns and the running water, I was like, holy smoke, that guy's pretty good. I need to hire him. So yeah, once I found that I've got a little bit of a niche being in front of a camera, I kind of fell in love with it. So it's a fun thing to do.
Well, the camera kind of gives us a better perspective, I think, of who we are, because I think so often, so many of us, we kind of deride ourselves and we don't give ourselves credit for really who we are. Because you're really very good in that. Where is that fern and moss laden spot? Is that near your home somewhere?
Yeah, it's a Skyline mid-range preserve up above Redwood City and Woodside, California.
Gorgeous.
All the shots shot in the first 2 films. There's about 19 or 20 shots of me are all shot around Cupertino, California, which is where I live.
That's just on the southwest corner of the bay, just a little southwest of the bay, San Francisco Bay, isn't it?
Correct. It's Silicon Valley. Apple Computers a few miles from my house.
Right.
I've got Palo Alto here, San Jose, and San Francisco is about 40 miles north of me.
I lived in San Francisco for a while. I was stationed there in the Marine Corps. I was stationed aboard USS Midway. Matter of fact, I got discharged up there from San Francisco.
Yeah, it's a nice place.
Yeah, it's a very nice. Of course, that was back in 1962. Things have changed considerably since then. There wasn't any Silicon Valley back then. There weren't, computers. They filled a room, a large room, or might have even been punch cards at that point.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah.
I got here 30 years ago, and it's really changed a lot. And I'm about to leave for India, and I'm probably not going to miss this area very much.
I understand. Well, you got a BS from Purdue?
Correct.
In computer science?
Right.
So you worked for a company that you developed a program much like Skype? Is that, tell me the story on that. What was it?
Well, yeah, I mean, and when you hear the story, you gotta look at the entire picture. I worked in my career, maybe 20 jobs over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that's my own personality quirks, and part of that was sort of the way Silicon Valley rolled. if you didn't like your job, you can just walk across the street and get another job. So software engineers sort of had an upper hand. I would work at some places for 2 weeks and then just, you know what, this isn't happening. Sorry, dude, later. But in any event, I had struggled my career trying to really get on track. I actually arrived in Silicon Valley in 1983, which is the worst economic times in the last 30 years.
I was crushed in 1983, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
So I got off, I got my degree at just the worst possible time, and my career just never got on track. In any event, around the year 2000, I was working at a company. I'd been there for a few years, and we had a lot of turmoil, and I was kind of getting tired of the nonsense in the company, and so I went off with one engineer and developed a product in 8 weeks' time that was functionally not only the same thing as Skype, but had features in it that Skype still doesn't have.
Huh?
And so, it had streaming video. If you can imagine your Skype client being able to watch like YouTube videos through the client. It had video voicemail, or just video mail. It had elements of TiVo in it, elements of Slingbox. And I basically pissed off the entire middle management of the company that I was working at.
I'm sure.
And I got, well, they had, I mean, we were a public company, and we were trying to sell our wares to the telecommunication carriers. And we had gone to them and told them that the things that they wanted done were going to take 20 man-years worth of work. And I did it in 8 weeks with one engineer.
Oh, wow.
And basically embarrassed everybody. And so I got fired and escorted out the door by a rent-a-cop who was kind enough to show me, pull back his jacket and show me his gun.
Really?
And there's really nothing like telling you that we really, really don't like you and we don't want you here than a man with a piece of cold iron saying, get out of here.
Pretty shocking event for sure.
Well, I knew, one of two things was going to happen. I was going to be the hero, or I was going to, I kind of went all in.
Right.
And I was fed up with the company. And you face it, anytime when you develop a product like that and you get fired, you're working in the wrong company.
Yeah.
But this was happening at the same time in my life as when my best friend and soulmate was losing her battle with breast cancer. So the dot-com collapse was happening. I got fired. She was, going through chemo and radiation and, failing in that. And so my life was just, I just got completely crushed.
Tough time.
Yeah, brutal. That was almost 10 years exactly. She died December 14th, so that 10-year anniversary is coming up in a few weeks.
That, did you lose your identity in that process?
What identity?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have no idea who I am anymore. My ego was completely just demolished, which is a good thing, but at the time it was extraordinarily painful.
Well, yeah, it's almost paralyzing when it's at that stage. I thought I'm an entrepreneur. Have been for most of my life. I had a few jobs here and there. But I thought I was an entrepreneur because I made that decision because I was bright. But as it turns out, I just was unemployable. Yeah. Mostly because I think what I'm hearing from you didn't want to take the BS either, and that was
right.
Yeah.
Right. Pearl Jam's got this song that came out about 5 years ago called "Unemployable." It's my theme song.
I had a hunch, I saw we related a lot together.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you got another thing going on too. You show up big time around the Frisbee disc Cooper thing. What's going on there?
Well, hopefully I'm going to be able to come to some sort of resolution here. But I'm, considered by myself, the best ultimate Frisbee player in the world.
Ah.
And it's something that, I started playing Frisbee in the 60s with my family, and I spent the 70s just playing disc all the time. When I got to Purdue, I found out there was this team sport that involved a disc, and I was, where do I sign up?
You bet.
So I was, I'm a gifted kind of athletic freak. I'm 51 years old, and I can still do a lot of things that, most people my age have long given up on. In any event, I'm gifted athletically. I'm an out-of-the-box thinker, and I spent 30 years becoming the best I can possibly be in Ultimate Frisbee, and it turns out that Ultimate Frisbee is, I don't even know how to begin. There's no parallels or no analogy, to tell you how screwed up it is as a game. There's no penalties. The boundaries are all very flimsy and arbitrary, inconsistent, and there's no referees. And what this leads to, I don't know if you've got kids, but I've got kids, and, Parenting 101 is that children learn best with firm, consistent, non-arbitrary boundaries.
Absolutely.
And Ultimate Frisbee is the opposite. And so basically what you've got is this culture of basically millions of people who play the game. The game was invented 43 years ago, and the entire culture is learning disabled because of this framework that the game is built around. And I've been on a sort of campaign for, the last 8 or 9 years, trying to wake them up and saying, guys, this is just not, this is a failed social experiment. Great group of people. From that standpoint, it's been a success, but the sport just has not evolved. The players are still making the same, mistakes they've made 30 years ago, and it's very frustrating for me to be, I can't even play right now. I've been kicked out of every game in the Bay Area.
Is that right?
And, well, yeah, because my game is so different, and Ultimate Frisbee is a religion. And as soon as, and I'm sure you would probably have the same reaction based on this short conversation, as soon as someone tells me how I am supposed to think, I'm going to think the other way.
Everything changes right then, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, excuse me? You're
Yeah.
going to pass, but I'm,
I guess you don't know. I guess you don't know who you're talking to, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. And so after failing to really bring about, reform in the game, I went off and created my own, which is called Disc Hoops. If anybody would like to check it out, it's dischoops.com, DISCHOOPS. And Disc Hoops is the greatest sport ever created. It's really phenomenal.
Well, I hope that gets off the ground for you. It sounds pretty interesting.
A Frisbee is the best game device ever invented. And you would have to go out of your way to screw up a sport that was oriented around a Frisbee.
Is that
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I can deliver a disc 250 different ways. Steve Nash has got nothing on me.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's not me. That's the disc. A disc is just so phenomenal, and a good quality disc. And Ultimate was actually invented by a guy that most people are familiar with. His name is Joel Silver. He's the executive producer for the Matrix movies, Lethal Weapon series. Yeah. When he was 17 years old, he invented this in summer camp. And if you Google an image of Joel Silver, you would realize this guy probably should not be out inventing sports. I'll just leave it at that.
No way, right? Well, there's no running or anything in it, is there? It's just just to catch it, or is it? You actually put it in like a basketball, right?
Oh, dude, you didn't see the video clip.
No, I didn't. I'll have to.
No. Disc hoops is more running. It's more tiring than There's hockey, but with hockey you're wearing 80 pounds of equipment when you're skating and stuff.
Yeah.
This is up there with hockey, except there's no line changes. This is probably the most exhausting sport there is.
And you don't beat each other up, right?
Right. It's cleaner than basketball. It's meant to be a graceful, refined sport. There's 2 archways 20 yards apart in the field. And one of the unique parts about disc hoops is that, how in basketball or football the field reverses at halftime.
Right.
In disc hoops, the field reverses every time someone scores.
Oh, wow.
So imagine Steve Nash burying the 3, and then now all of a sudden the court reverses and he's attacking the other basket. And you just keep attacking. Watch the clip on the website, you'll see.
Oh, I definitely will.
Yeah.
I ended up watching the clip of you playing a guitar in front of 200 people, wrote a song. It looked to me like you were playing with some people from India, or from that?
Yeah, I was at a retreat. There was a mix of people from India and North America, but yeah, I know how to play one song on guitar. It's actually the song I wrote.
Well,
in other words, I don't know how to play guitar, but at the same time, I still picked one up and wrote what. I played it a few weeks ago, and I brought a crowd of about 600 people to tears with the song.
Oh,
so, it's pretty cool to be able to pull out these talents you know. Oh, I'll just go write a song. I'll just go do a documentary film. You know, I'm just going to go invent a new sport.
Well, you know, I think that played probably played a huge role in why you didn't get along with Silicon Valley that well. When you're really creative like that, it's tough, and you have to be given plenty of space for that creativity. A wise company will give you that space.
There's one guy here in Silicon Valley who's very much like that.
Mm-hmm.
He just died,
Oh, wow.
and that's Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
But for every Steve Jobs, there's 1,000 or 10,000 Frank Huguenards who just, I mean, Steve, I don't know if he ever understood how lucky he was, but when he went back to Apple after he got fired, and he practically ran Apple into the ground.
Right. I recall when all that happened. Yeah.
Right. But when they hired him back, he had just one condition basically. He said, "Give me complete control."
Right.
And that's why you take someone like me, if I would have had complete control in any of these things, especially the technology. I mean, Skype got bought for $3 billion, and I got fired. What's wrong with this picture?
Yeah, something isn't right. Well, Kurt, I think Steve Jobs, really benefited from owning Pixar and from his relationship with that company and with George Lucas.
Sure. I mean, Steve was obviously brilliant, but so are a lot of people.
Yeah.
And he had a combination of talents just like I do. He was in the right place at the right time. He got here, he actually grew up here, but he started working in Silicon Valley 7 or 8 years before I had. And so, I kind of missed out on all that.
Luck and timing, that's part of the deal, isn't it?
That's all right. You know what? I'm a happy man, and I've gotten crushed. And, I mean, look at Steve. He got a second lease on life, 7 years ago.
Everything changed for him, didn't it?
Well, no. I don't think so. I mean, he how quickly did he go back? In fact, I think so. He took 9 months before he got surgery, and he was working. Nobody recognized. He was still working 80-hour weeks. He had surgery. A few weeks after surgery, he was back working 70, 80-hour weeks. He's been a workaholic. He's got 3 kids who are fatherless now because he had the second chance at life, and yet, he worked himself to death. So,
yeah, and it's pretty easy to miss that family and that other part of life when you're a workaholic. About any addiction will do that to you. Have you had any trouble with addictions?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ultimate Frisbees is hugely addictive. There's no penalty, so you get all these false positives.
Yeah.
I've consumed my share of beer. I used to make beer. I mean, typically whenever I do things, I do them really well. And when I made beer, of course, it was awesome. And beer is like a dime, I think, for a 22-ounce glass when you make it. It's basically sugar water. So, yeah, sure, all kinds of addiction. Women are the one of the most addictive substances out there.
It certainly has been my path. Alcohol and women, oh my goodness. Throwing a few drugs here and there, and it's been a wild ride. But I'll tell you what, at the same time, I learned a lot from those addictions. Now I see those addictions, and I've been really kind of, I don't exercise them for probably 25, 30 years, but I don't know, there's a benefit from going way over to the other side and finally coming back and getting grounded spiritually, and some of the hard knocks we get really take us to the best places that we can go to.
I had this thought a few weeks ago that sort of about a pursuit of enlightenment, and it was sort of like, well, I might not make it this lifetime. I may have to come back for a few more lifetimes to get the rest ironed out. But I hope next lifetime I'm born into a nice home. I got loving parents. I get to go to Stanford. I get a nice job. All those things I didn't get this lifetime. And then I thought for a second. It's like, wait a second. If it had not been for the train wreck that my life is, I wouldn't be on the phone with you right now talking about this stuff.
Absolutely, and you know what? And it could be an extra 2 or 3 or 4 lifetimes you'd have to come back to find that train wreck.
Right, and you look at all the people right now who are just utterly asleep, and they've got their jobs and their bills and their mortgages and their kids, and before they know it, they're 60, and you know, they're completely spiritually, you know, asleep. So, yeah, addictions are good.
Totally asleep, and they have no idea that they're asleep. Yeah, well, you know, but it's like anything. If the addiction can, if you can't get loose from it, they kind of do the same thing being asleep does to you. Because I think you're just even more asleep in the middle of an addiction.
Right, and the biggest addiction of all is thinking.
Oh, for sure. And people don't have a clue, do they?
Yeah, they're
I
just
say that.
there.
I say that to people, and they look at me like, "What? Are you crazy?" Thinking,
Right.
I loved it. I like it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The responsibility of being in the now moment eludes most people because it is a responsibility, especially early on.
Totally.
So you were raised Christian and cynical by the age of 6. That was about my story.
Yeah, you know, you have these nuns, you know, rapping on your wrist with you know, rulers or whatever, and
Jesus is love.
Yeah, yeah, and if you don't buy what we're selling, you're going to burn in hell the rest of your, you know, for eternity, and some other nonsense. Like, what? Wait a second. What part of this, you know, makes any sense? This can't possibly be. This is nonsense.
You use a term that I really relate to. It's a great term, that we live in a psychic penitentiary.
Right.
Well, that's what a powerful term that is. I mean, that's the image that presents, and you can see that and feel it. And I feel it from my own life, you know.
Right. I'd like to say belief systems are a psychic penitentiary that incarcerate our minds.
Well, you know, the funny thing about the belief system is they I guess like everything else, they do one or the other. They can also free us. But you know, like, but I don't know, Frank. I think there's some stuff going on in the DNA and some of these other programs we're carting around that are maybe even stronger than the thinking.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I had some really amazing experiences that went into these films. You know, of going through my own vibrational sort of research and looking at what was. I mean, I was meditating in Montana a couple summers ago, and I did this really deep meditation where I was. I had just, I just dropped my son off. I drove him 1,300 miles. He was 15 years old at the time. And I dropped him off in a Safeway parking lot without any contact information for him, and I drove away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, the most insane thing I've ever done, and the most brilliant thing I've ever done. Basically, he ran away from home, except I gave him a ride.
Wow.
Yeah, and it worked out great. I mean, he got on a bus 8 weeks later on schedule, got himself back home, and, it really improved my relationship with him. He grew up a lot. But it was completely insane. I mean, I could see myself on the morning news program. Let me see, Mr. Huguenard, or let me get this straight. You did what?
Yeah, how'd that play? How old was he? Yeah.
He was 15. But it worked out great, and he's lost 50 pounds since then. Anyway, I had dropped him off, drove up to Montana. I was meditating, and I was transitioning back and forth between thinking that he's committing some heinous crime. So I was just immersed in fear, and then going back between that and this deep sense of love and sort of like blessing him and just loving him. And looking at, as I was doing this in this really deep meditation, looking at basically what I perceived to be pre-thoughts, and they were all forming as fractals. It was just incredible.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a visual.
Quite a visual, and not only that, given my experience in computer science and software and hardware and how computers, operate at the machine code level, I was looking at, when I was in fear, the colors were just all kind of muddy and not very vibrant, and the fractals were all kind of stunted. And then when I would vibrate in love, the colors were just brilliant, and the growth of the fractals was just, expanding, massively. And then I keep transitioning back and forth. The first few times was accidental, or, I kind of just drifted back and forth, and then I was having fun with it and intentionally going to fear, to love, to fear, and watching. And I recognized that I was looking at basically machine code, and that all of our thoughts, which are addictions, as you say,
ones and zeros.
Are ones and zeros and vibrations. It's all vibrations. And that, knowing how software has been evolved, and that software is, a language, and there's, it's basically constructs just like our thinking is. And so I had this big vision of, oh my God, we're these computers, and this is not an analogy. We're absolutely computers. And just looking at the whole addictive nature of the whole thing was just phenomenal. And then 2 months later, I started doing this film.
Well, when you talk about fractals and seeing ones and zeros and numbers, and physicists are at a point now where they say the only way that it gets to a place where the only way they can discuss or even talk about reality is with mathematics. And so everything comes back to math, at least from from our human perspective at this point.
Yeah. Well, scientists are reductionist.
Yeah.
And they can, at the end of the day, and this is going to be the big theme of my third film, Beyond Reason, which is you cannot find God through being a reductionist.
Can't happen.
You can keep reducing and reducing. You go to the atom, you split the atom, you go down to subatomic particles and quarks and neutrinos. You break those apart. You can only reduce. You can keep reducing, keep reducing, keep reducing. You're never going to find consciousness.
Well, yeah, because God's in the opposite direction. Consciousness is in the opposite direction.
Exactly.
It's that expanded part of this. So let's talk a little bit about your first film. Gives our audience an idea of what that was about. That was called Beyond Me. And tell us about the film, and most importantly, what was your motive? What were you trying to accomplish with that film?
It's an alarm clock. It's meant for those people who are asleep to say, look, this is everything you see around you is not real. What's real is your consciousness. So Beyond Me takes the viewer on a trip. And by the way, Beyond Me can be, and both my films can be watched at my website, which is beyondmefilm.com. So Beyond Me takes you through a trip from the cosmos to subatomic particles and quantum physics, animal instincts, reincarnation, cellular biology, personality disorders, computer science. And it weaves all of these together in a way that really explains, how consciousness works. And sort of, I filled in the missing gap in Darwinian theory of evolution in this film. I've kind of merged, Eastern traditions with,
Western thought, right?
Western, scientific theories on evolution, and completed the theory. And it all goes to explain how. I mean, look, there's an expression about humans that a leopard can't change its spots.
Right.
And it just means, oh, that guy, he's never going to change. That's just the way he is. And that's absolutely not true.
No, it's a fallacy, complete.
And the way to change your spots is through meditation. That basically all of the traits and tendencies that make up all of our behavior and personality disorders and all of these things that cause problems in our lives are all instinctive behaviors that have taken hundreds of thousands of lifetimes to develop. And that the way to remove these impressions from our consciousness is through meditation. And so the motivation for the film was to really share with people why meditation is important and to get more people inspired to start meditating.
Well, yeah, what I saw was a really good sales piece on selling meditation, and which is really necessary. We have a lot more people meditating now. Before Maharishi Mahat Yoga came here with TM, there wasn't any meditation much to speak of.
Right, and in 1959, when they brought it here, they were selling it under stress relief, and it'll lower you. And today they're selling it the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Westerners are, and I kind of looked at it and said, wait a second. I think people are ready for something a little bit more contemporary, and so. I think people can look at this and say, okay, meditation, sure, it will lower your blood pressure. You'll sleep better. It lowers the cortisol, the stress hormone. But those are just side effects. What it really does is, releases you from these past impressions.
I got involved with TM in 1974. TM and Silva Mind Control. I did them both in the same year. Well, it was quite a year for me. Changed everything. I had been on this this path, like a metaphysical path. But I was at that point I was still looking for the pixie dust, the magic, and meditation.
I got some of that if you want.
Listen, we could sell that. We could leave all the rest of this stuff behind if we could actually package that up well enough, Frank.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. So, with your second film, let's talk about your second film. What induced you? Was that second film because the first one really brought the filmmaker out in you, or a kind of combination of that and?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously got a tremendous response from the first one. It's kind of shocking. You're like, oh, holy smokes. But at the same time, if you look at the first one and you kind of look at it as a composite, and you take the clip about reincarnation out of it,
right?
The whole thing kind of falls apart. I mean, reincarnation is so integral to, the fabric that's being woven there.
Right.
That I debated. Okay, are Westerners ready for this? But I couldn't. I didn't really have a choice. But I got a lot of blowback in the first film about reincarnation. Oh, we don't believe in that. And so, through all my research and my studies, I've just come to the, assumption or realization, I'm not sure which, that Jesus would have had to have taught reincarnation. Yeah, every other great master would have taught it. Where is this? And I knew that there was a lot of destroyed documentation and these kind of things with the early Christian church.
Oh, for sure.
But I didn't know much about it, and I didn't, so I was, well, okay, where are these lost teachings of Jesus? And so I had heard that there's, something called Gospel of Thomas. I didn't know much about. I heard that reincarnation is in there, in some references. And I began researching other things too, but I had read the Gospel of Thomas probably in February of this year. Uh-huh. And it takes an hour to read. It's 114 passages. You can find it online anywhere. Just Google Gospel of Thomas. And it's quite a bit different from the rest of the Bible, and it's basically 114 quotations from Jesus. And as soon as I read it, I recognized it all as the same sort of Eastern traditions that I've been studying for the last 10 years.
It all syncs up then, doesn't it? That's what happened
it's like,
with me,
I was like, my jaw dropped. There's a lot of evidence that points. So what Beyond Belief is about is that Jesus trained in India. There's no doubt about this. Between the ages of 12 to 30, he went on this spiritual odyssey for 18 years, learning everything he could and purifying his body and his mind. And then after the crucifixion, he went back to India, and he died there sometime around the age of 100 years old. This was kind of shocking to everybody.
Right. What was interesting to me is the way you documented that. I think Esa was Isa.
Right.
What is that document?
Boy, what's the name of that thing? It's the Book of Isa, the Best of the Sons of Man, I believe is what it's called.
Right.
But there's some documents in Tibetan monasteries that talk about Jesus being there, 2,000 years ago, and studying. And these kinds of anthropological or historical, anecdotal pieces of evidence exist, and they've been in other documentaries, and you can look around and see bits and pieces here and there, and I've kind of assembled all those into one place. But what really sells this movie is I've done something which no one else has done, and to me this is the most obvious thing, which is take all the evidence that we have, the physical evidence, but combine that with the Gospel of Thomas. I mean, Jesus was a spiritual teacher. Why not take a spiritual argument and make a compelling case where, look, this knowledge that's in the Gospel of Thomas doesn't come from anywhere in the Mideast. But if you compare it with ancient Vedic traditions, it's a fingerprint match.
Absolutely.
It's exactly, absolutely. So I've combined both of those, and there's a Professor Dale Martin who was kind enough to allow me to use one of his lectures on the Gospel of Thomas in my film, and I've juxtaposed his reading, somewhat perplexed of these sayings without knowing what they meant, against my own personal interpretations of them, and I'll let the viewer watch for themselves and see, and make their own judgments. And I don't really try to make a case in this film of, this is what happened. I basically try to play the role of a defense attorney. And I'm just making my case, and I'm sequestering you, the jury, for 1 hour to sit and watch my evidence, and you make up your own mind.
I think if we miss taking that kind of a position, Frank, we put ourselves in the other position which we abhor, and that's the one, I have the right answer, and this is the only answer.
Yeah.
And so there's this fine line between, okay, here's what I found, if you can use some of this, great, and if you can't, that's great too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've put together a fairly compelling case, and in fact, if things were completely the other way around, if it was just assumed everybody knew that this was the accepted, story, and you were to go off and prove, the Roman Catholic version, you'd be laughed out of court. There's no evidence to support, there's virtually no evidence except for the Bible itself, which is a completely, the pedigree of this book is very easy to challenge.
Well, you can go back and find the Roman Catholic version, and some of the myths and from some of the earlier civilizations had the same story.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, I think that, it's kind of interesting when you watch this parallel thinking, with the thinking like was in your film and the way I think, and then you have the Catholic Church or whatever it was, before that. They seem to run through history together.
It's pretty it's been this death spiral for tens of millions of years between the two schools of thought, and that's my life with Ultimate Frisbee. It's identical. It's kind of frightening, but it's exactly that same drama is playing out. It's mind-boggling.
What effect do you think that the reality that we live in a holographic world, what effect do you think that has on all of this?
On
just on how we see things, how we how this confinement that we have.
Right. I mean, we have been since birth completely drawn out of ourselves and distracted through our five senses. Touch, sound, taste, feel, etc. And so we make real the unreal.
Right.
I like this expression that the truth is that which doesn't change, and anything that changes is not real.
Can't be truth.
You're right, it just can't be truth. The truth doesn't change. I mean, that's a very simple definition, and it's a very good thing to live your life by. So everything that you touch, feel, everything that you perceive through your five senses is not real. In fact, you're misperceiving everything. And so, of course, that's having a huge impact because all that's doing is perpetuating the illusion of separation.
Well, what's interesting about a holographic universe, that whole idea, is that somewhere way out there on the far edges of the universe is a record of this. I mean, the data sets out there in a two-dimensional way and expresses itself in our third-dimensional world. It's kind of a pretty wild concept.
This is what my next film is going to be all about, and it's just a mind-boggling concept. Actually, I would say it's actually in a fourth dimension, not a second dimension. It's a dimension well outside of the universe itself.
Well, yeah, I think you're probably right. I think you're probably right. That's the reductionist idea that's in the two-dimensional. They talk about the black holes that all the information is lost, but yet it's not lost because it sets up on the edge of the black hole in the data is in that two-dimensional part, and it expresses the black hole itself. It's all pretty wild. All right. Well, that's a good segue into your next film. Tell us about that. What's your plan? Before we go there, though, you've got a website where you're getting. I think it's at Kickstarter.com. Tom will put out the address in our social networks and so forth, where you're raising money for your next film, and people can actually participate and be a part of your next film, which is pretty cool. For a couple of bucks, $10, $100, $500, whatever they want to do.
Right. If if you just watch my films and you want to say, hey, this was worth $1 pay-per-view, that's cool. For a $27 pledge, you get a exclusive copy of the new film when it comes out. For a $108 pledge, you get a 3 DVD special edition of all 3 of my films. So Kickstarter is a great way to raise funds for small projects. And I'm just $500 short of reaching the goal. The way that Kickstarter works is that you don't get funded at all. You don't get a penny unless you reach the goal that you've set for yourself. And so I'm just $500 short. I still have almost 6 weeks left, so I'm sure I'm going to get there. But please, if you watch my films, you want to see more, you want to participate in this, please chip in a few bucks. I'd really appreciate it.
Well, see, I think there's a bigger benefit here for those people who donate that might kind of like it gets missed in all of this. Yeah, it's good for Kickstarter is a good thing for you as the producer. But how many people really, like common regular people who don't live in Hollywood or aren't somehow attached to a producer or a director, really have the opportunity to say, hey, I helped fund that movie. I'm a part of that. And I think that's really important. I think if for the audience's sake, at least go take a look. $1 or $27 or $180 can take you on a pretty nice ride.
Yeah, and it's also, you're not funding the next Matrix movie. You're funding a community service project, basically. I mean, my first films have been watched over 100,000 times. They've touched, they've been life-changing for thousands of people.
Absolutely.
So you're contributing to that kind of thing as well. So back to your original question, I'll be leaving the Bay Area in early January, and I'll be spending almost 4 months in India filming on location my third film, Beyond Reason. And had you told me, 14 months ago that, Frank, in early 2012 you're going to spend, several months in India making a documentary film, I would have thought you were a lunatic. I mean, it's really amazing how the universe has unfolded here for me. It's kind of shocking. But I'll be traveling around. I've already got a lot of, very knowledgeable and, I don't know how to say, high-level spiritual teachers, swamis, gurus, yogis lined up to participate. And, my general approach here is to take some of this very esoteric knowledge and yet present it in the documentary format that I've kind of carved out initially myself. So you take some of this stuff and you may sort of make it academic, and you present it in sort of a fabric that, takes the viewer on a easy to understand explanation of things that are really not very easy to understand. So I'm very much excited about this. It's going to be phenomenal.
So do you have a script? You winging it? How is that playing out?
Dude, don't you know who I am?
Yeah, I had a hunch you might be winging it. The book, the script wasn't written. Hey, you did an interview. Part of your film was an interview or not an interview, a thing that Evelyn Pagels was in. Did you you get a chance to meet her and talk with her? I tried to get her on the show, and I couldn't make contact with her.
I did contact her. I got her permission to use that. She goes at it with Stephen Colbert. And, he's kind of funny. The show's on Comedy Central, and so it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but he's a fairly hardcore Catholic apologist. And so
big time.
He's fairly sincere in his, jousting he's doing. And have you ever seen anybody handle that kind of aggression any more gracefully than she did?
She handled him really well.
I couldn't do that. I would be ready to punch him.
Well, she's pretty solid in her understanding and her knowledge. She's,
right.
Yeah.
She's fantastic. Her and I emailed back and forth, and I hope to meet her someday. But no, have not done anything except exchange a few emails with her.
But if there's enough, knowing her enough to flip me an introduction, I would appreciate that. I'd love to have her on the show.
Yeah,
so you want to tell us more about your film? You want to leave us in suspense, or how do you want to handle that end of it?
Well, I would like to say that after my first two, I've convinced myself, if not others, that I'm fully capable of producing a theatrical release, and so this film will be. It'll be entered into Sundance. It'll be entered into whatever film festivals I can enter it into. I'm a little bit. I'm probably too stupid right now to know what I've gotten myself into. In other words, I think some of the spiritual teachers that I'll be speaking with, are really phenomenal people. That I'm like, oh my God, how did I get this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy?
Right.
And I really need to step up my game even higher than it was for the first two films. So this one will be different in the sense that it'll be completely 100% produced by me. The first two I would get, I needed something from Bruce Lipton, so I sent, an email to his secretary and said, hey, I need a clip of Bruce saying such and such, and so they shipped me a DVD. And so several clips from the first few films, are like that. But this next one, I'll be producing entirely, the entire footage myself.
Everything.
And it'll be, if it's half as good as I know it can be, it'll be phenomenal. And it'll just be really mind-blowing about, what is the nature of true reality? Who are we? What are we doing here? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I'll look forward to that film. You're a good storyteller. That's a prerequisite, for all of this. It's
funny. I didn't know I was a lot of things. People tell me my narration sounds awesome. I hate my voice, but that's like been the number one compliment I've heard is how good of a narrator. I was like, wow.
Yeah,
really?
you got a good voice. Well, guys like us, we started telling stories at an early age. Of course they were stories trying to get ourselves out of the trouble we'd gotten into. So
I don't know. A lot of my stories were just, fantasies. I lived, I did a lot of escapism when I was a kid just to escape the harsh reality of what my childhood was, and I think that's where my storytelling,
right,
came from.
So, what advice would you give to anybody out there who's, really feeling that creative urge, but they got a 40-hour job and they're kind of enslaved to the bills and everything that's going on? What's the chance of them breaking free of all that?
Zero. Forget it. Put a gun to your head.
It's tough. You almost have. Yeah, you really have to be willing to risk it all, don't you?
I haven't worked in 11 years, and here I am. I've learned one thing, that the universe will take care of you. You may not, Mick Jagger, right? You may not get what you want, but you always get what you need. And if you have the possibility to step away from your job and your career and not look forward to waking up 15 years from now and being 60 years old and a pension and and your life is over, get in the escape hatch and get out. If you've got any ability to do that, go for it. I'm about to jump. I'm about to move into some ashrams in India and North Carolina and Montreal. And, I'm stepping into a huge unknown, and that's the best place to be.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, one of the things you just said, I think, is so critical, and that is that the universe will take care of us. And it certainly has. It has taken. It's taken. I haven't had. Like in years, I haven't had the sports cars and the airplanes and all that I once had, but my inner life is wonderful, and I'm living in the middle of my dream, just like I hear you living in the middle of your dream.
Yeah, it's just chill. Everything is taken care of. You just, you spend, there's a clip at the end of Beyond Me where I'm talking about, that we waste all of our life, worrying about the future or having a regret about the past, and it's just such wasted energy. Just get out of all that. The universe will take care of you. Don't worry.
Did you listen to Steve Jobs' commencement address?
Sure. I mean, it was very Eastern.
Yeah, was
yeah.
He? I mean, that's what made me think he had changed some, because he sure laid it out there, this idea of taking a risk. And Steve Jobs was a brilliant marketing person. And that's for sure.
And I think the best marketing he ever did was of Steve Jobs.
Did a great job with that, didn't he? But
didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he was brilliant, no doubt. But the guy was also he was a fairly vicious, mean-spirited guy to work for, and that goes back to this summer. I mean,
yeah,
he mellowed. He mellowed for a lot of reasons. Getting fired kind of mellowed him out, but he still had a lot of that malignancy in him, and
Well, I watched
it was a brilliant speech. I mean, that's what he did
Yeah.
at Macworld every year to sell, whatever new product. He was awesome.
Oh, yeah, he was a heck of a marketer. Well, I watched he and Bill Gates, and they were two vicious guys.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I think in order to have, but the problem with that is 80-hour weeks, but, I say it's a problem, but the reality is that I bet you work 80 hours when you're working on your project. Do you not
right,
get involved?
but I just, I 1 week before Beyond Belief was released,
right,
I didn't have a film.
Right.
I mean, I put that film together in 1 week. I'd been filming it for a couple months because I kind of knew what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it. But 1 week before I released it, there was no film at all. So yeah, Abe Lincoln had an expression I love, which is, if I had 8 hours to cut down a tree, I would spend the first 7 hours sharpening the blade.
Absolutely.
So when I need to, I'll work those hours, but I'm not going to do that for a lifestyle. That's just, and the more I've meditated and the more I've spent time sort of waking up, the less attractive going back to work in Silicon Valley has become. It's just such a non-starter. That's not happening. So
we got about 4 minutes left here or so, and I want to talk about one last thing, and then I want to check and see if there was something that we missed that you'd like to talk about. I watched that little clip where the local newspaper came out and interviewed you, and you're on a ladder up in your tomato plants that are as high as your roof. Well, how'd you do that?
I don't know.
That's amazing. Do you have a good crop? I mean, a lot of tomatoes, or just tall?
We grew in that plot, which is, imagine 20 foot by 40 foot, which is about the size of your typical master bedroom, I think. Or,
right.
No, that's 2 master bedrooms.
Yeah, a couple of them.
20 feet by 40 feet. I grew 2,000 pounds of tomatoes, and we raised $10,000 for Katrina relief.
Wow, that's amazing.
There's a little bit of grace flowing in your life when you got something like that happening. And then I went on from there to start, this 501c3 not-for-profit organization. So, I did that for a few years. That's still, active, but not as much as it used to be. But that was a fun thing to do too.
See, I think that's part of the bargain with the universe. The universe will take care of you, but the universe expects you to take care of others.
Service. Well, there is no others.
Well, I agree. But we still live in a world where separation is it's there. I'm not, we talk about everything being one, Frank, but you know what? I'm not sure that, that the separation is a bad thing if you combine that with knowing that you're all one. So there's a blend. Something happens in that mix,
Sure. I mean, we don't want just everything homogenized into one thing.
Absolutely not, no.
Diversity is a good thing, but there is just one consciousness.
Yep, absolutely. One consciousness with a lot of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a couple of minutes left. What did we miss?
We can talk for about the next 5 hours. I think this has been a lot of fun.
I'm sure we could.
We do have a lot in common. Not much. Just the main thing. It'd be nice to get the last $500. Check out discoops.com. It's a phenomenal sport that hopefully will be mainstream someday. It's a very refined sport that is really, for me, it's a dream come true. After spending 40 years, playing frisbee, it's everything I've always wanted in a game. It's phenomenal.
And they can get to Kickstarter and that by coming to your website, because the address on Kickstarter is pretty long. Just come to your website.
Right. Just go to Beyond Me Film, and then there's a button there that says Kickstarter Donate, and just go there, throw in $1, throw in $10, whatever you want to throw in.
BeyondMeFilm.com. You're gonna on your little tour. You getting anywhere near Florida?
The Ultimate Frisbee World Championships was there about 2 weeks ago, dude.
Were they really? Well, I'll tell
See,
you what,
that's how big Ultimate is. It's played by millions. The national championship was a few miles from your house. You don't even know about it.
I had no clue.
Right. It's a brain dead sport.
I'm going to tell you what. You get down here to Florida. You look me up. We'll have some coffee together, and I'm sure we'll have a good time talking. I'm looking forward to your film.
Yeah, and I've been in Sarasota before. I love it down there.
It's great, isn't it? Listen,
Oh, yeah.
when you get that film together, and everything is moving along, give us a call. We'll get you back on the show.
Fantastic. Look forward to it.
Yeah, good luck with that, my friend.
Okay.
Good to talk with you.
Absolutely. Good night.
Good night now. Okay, great evening for me. I hope it was as good an evening for you out there as an audience as it was for me tonight. Frank's a good guy. He's a very creative guy. Check out his films. Be sure to come back next week. We're going to talk about sacred tantra, sacred sexuality, and we're going to talk about it as spiritual adults. So I think you'll find it'll be an interesting show. Next week, same time, same place, 9 o'clock Tuesday night, sbnvideo.com. In the meantime, don't forget to accentuate the positive and have a fantastic week.